Right, round two, I was just very excited to get in front and talk to everyone. So, hi everyone. I'm glad to have this first spot after lunch. And as Camilla said, my name is James Ellsmoor. I'm director of a non-profit, Solar Head Estate, and that's kind of who I was invited here to represent. And I also run a communications agency called Island Innovation. That's my last slide that's up there, not my first one. But anyway, the final slide. And Island Innovation works with companies concerned about sustainability image, and also helps company leaders with promoting their personal brand, particularly with social media. I also have a fun fact. I also have a master's in island studies, which is a real degree from a university in Iceland's near neighbor, the Shetland Isles. So yeah, if you can. So I'll be talking about this concept of islandness within place branding. I'm used to working in the warmer islands of the Caribbean, but I'll try and draw some comparisons between different islands and different approaches to renewable energy. I'll introduce a few case studies from Aruba in the Netherlands Antilles, the Isles of Scilly in England, and Samsø in Denmark. And then briefly introduce you to the Solar Head of State campaign and tell you what the hell that's all about. There's a lot to cram into 7 minutes. So, islandness is a special category within place branding. I know what you're thinking, did I make up a word? But I can't claim credit for that. The real descriptive word for an island would be insularity, but that has kind of a negative connotation. It makes places sound backward, and I'm sure anyone from any islander would tell you that's not really the case. So we use islandness as kind of a way to promote a positive angle. Island is a very useful communication tool, device in branding. Islands have a real physical boundary. It's very different to an imaginary border in another country. And you can really see a concept and use that as a message to tell a story when you want to brand a place. Islands have this generic brand. We kind of give them subconsciously these certain different characteristics. They're green, they're exotic, they're pure, they're fantasy paradise. And as a rhetorical or a literary device, they're places of dreams, think your Caribbean holiday magazines, and they're also places of nightmares, think Lord of the Flies or Jurassic Park. You can't escape from an island when you're there. And this positive island brand applies to some extent regardless of the climate. Iceland has built its entire brand as a country on being pure and natural, in many similar ways to the Caribbean or the Pacific Islands. And the earliest example of this kind of island branding might be Eric the Red, calling the neighboring Greenland green, as a way of attracting people to settle this fertile climate and persuade them that it's not actually an inhospitable snowy ice cap. So how does this apply to energy? Well, most islands have an economic motive to adopt renewable energy. Iceland is a bit different. It has this very unique resource, but in the Caribbean, the countries I'm working in can pay anywhere from 20 to 55 US cents per kilowatt hour, compared to 9, 10 cents in a lot of US states. So there's a huge economic incentive there to find alternatives when we're using mostly diesel. And these higher prices mean that you can do things that wouldn't be economically feasible elsewhere. You kind of have this laboratory or test bed for new concepts that can be done on a small scale and provide a prototype for other places to follow. And in general, it does mean that renewable energy normally makes sense. So obviously in the Caribbean, we have a great solar resource, and that's what we spend a lot of time promoting. There are islands all over the world that have adopted this energy island branding or this green branding. This is just a few, not an exhaustive list, from across different areas. A bit biased towards Europe maybe because they're some of the ones that I know well. And I'll run through a few specific case studies. But these have been efforts to differentiate themselves in some form, and often it can be a very complementary thing to use renewable energy to complement that green brand and attract tourists as well. So Aruba, I think there's a couple of people here from the Netherlands maybe. Green Aruba has promoted itself as a center for renewable energy. And it might actually be a case where the marketing is overtaking the reality a little bit, but they've done a fantastic job of having a yearly conference and pushing this, the idea that they have one of the only wind farms in the Caribbean, which has been a really useful symbol for them. The Isles of Scilly, off the southwest coast of England in Cornwall, this is a small island of 2,000 people, and they recently attracted it says 10, but it's actually £15 million funding from London for just 2,000 people. So they were able to leverage their status as an island and the smallest council area in England to attract this phenomenal amount of funding relative to the population to pursue renewable energy and smart technology projects. And actually, the UK Industrial White Paper has outlined Scilly and the reason for justifying all this money as a place where they can test out a model for the rest of the country to follow, which may or may not be realistic, but it's resulted in this large amount of funding. Samsø is perhaps the original energy island, and is now an international attraction for green tourists coming to see this center of innovation as they position themselves. And the project was originally funded by the Danish government back in the days when wind was still a fairly new concept as a place to test out a lot of these technologies. So there's 3 islands for you. I'll just briefly explain what Solar Head of State is. It does what it says in the tin. We're a campaign that's asking world leaders to install solar on prominent government buildings. And before you utility executives start to roll your eyes at me, I'm not pretending that it's any more than it is, a publicity stunt to benefit renewable energy. But it's also a great communications device. 10 kilowatts of solar panels on the Parliament building or the White House equivalent gets far more press and international attention than the 10 megawatt solar farm down the road. So it's a great way to communicate with the general public the benefits of renewables. Over the next 3 years, we're working with 22 island nation governments around the world. And these islands themselves be able to use these projects to position themselves as beacons of sustainable technology. So we have island nations around the world that are really pushing renewable energy. So there we go, my time's up. Hopefully I've been able to briefly communicate the attractiveness of islands and their use in branding exercise. And also, while I'm up here, I'm going to plug this briefly. The few of us who are using Twitter actively here know that I've been promoting my island sustainability newsletter, which you're all welcome to sign up to. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Camilla, and all the team, Friedrich, Siggy, and Birger, for inviting me here.
Thank you, James.